Hey everyone, this is James Stone from the Helsinki office of Futurice, and welcome to my newly formed home office here in Helsinki. And today I'm going to be talking about COVID-19 and the dark side of web performance. And a lot of this talk and the idea behind it has been my influence from the media, and perhaps I'm one of those people that really doesn't read the news a lot. There's a lot of negativity often, but I find myself looking at the media more and more. And so maybe I'm a bit cynical, but I think media plays a really important role right now. So even though maybe I'm cynical and making jokes, I think it's super important. So as I created this talk, I thought of some different ways to present this title. And you know, I see a lot of these kinds of images in different types of media outlets, and it's always so scary, like the red on black, right? And I even saw this one of someone hoarding toilet paper, kind of like a drug dealer in their apartment. And these are all from Unsplash. And so for me, these are kind of echoing the ideas. And then I got to something that was like still kind of conveying, I think, maybe some seriousness, and we're still concerned about this, but maybe in a more childlike manner, maybe in a way that's like less intimidating and kind of fear-mongering. And so here's all of them, four up, so you can choose which one you want to think about in terms of this talk. And let me jump right into it. So this all came about for me thinking about this idea of performance. It's kind of something I always think about, but I think it's more important now. So on March 18th, which was literally 9 days ago, the EU asked Netflix, hey, you need to reduce our streaming because all of a sudden, like myself, everyone's working from home now, right? And during the day, we didn't used to have so many people on the internet. We didn't have so many people working and doing video calls and all this kind of thing. It actually became a problem. And then we have all the students at home. And so they asked Netflix, please turn this off. And so I couldn't find this article from, I think it was Business Week, because they changed it to a different article on me, but I found a similar one on TechCrunch, and here's some quotes. And so this was from Vodafone, and they reported 50% surge in internet traffic during the day. And people logged on from home, like I am right now, so that seems pretty logical, rather than in the business. And they said, expect this trend of data growth to continue, and that seems logical to me as well. And so what's going on right now, like I'm working from home, my internet, I'd say feels slower. I don't have any data to substantiate that. It also seems less reliable. Like I often have to reload pages, they get stalled or partially load. And this is on tools that I use for work, which kind of sucks. It's certainly not a great experience. But Netflix still works, at least here in Finland. I'm like, is it lower bandwidth? I haven't tested, I don't know. And the big question I have about this, like, so Netflix started this process and a lot of the other streaming services have joined, including YouTube. And the question is it helping? And I don't know. It's a question I ask to everyone here. So what I thought I would do is like look at some Finland media sites, and these are all kind of anonymized, so we can maybe guess at which ones these are. And we'll start from the best performing. And I'll talk a little bit about my methodology. I'm using Chrome 80 on a Mac. I'm using Lighthouse Audit. And I'm using device simulation of mobile, simulated throttling on, clear cache on, and my internet connection may be slow. And I have some details on that after the results. So we will start from the best performing media website in Finland. And for me, this is really important because I'm checking frequently, right? So I'm like, what's going on in Finland, happening, and important things, mobility and being able to move, and you know, I went to check what's going on with the virus. So this is probably the best performing one, and I think the important thing to point out on Lighthouse, if you've never looked at it, is we have this first contentful paint, and this is 2.1 seconds. This might be because of my internet connection being slow, or maybe heavy load on their servers. But you'll see right here, and this is what I'm going to get into as well, this time to interactive being red. This is like, I think, one of the bigger problems we're facing today. And let's see how bad it gets. So we start at 61, then we get to 51. We're at 11 seconds, 12.4 seconds, 7.7 seconds, 15.6 seconds, 15.6 seconds to interactive, and 16.3 seconds, right? So if you can imagine, I believe this is simulated to be on 3G, and so we are thinking that the internet is like suddenly becoming congested, that the internet's not performing the way that we're used to. Maybe we're on mobile devices, and especially if you're thinking like kind of very city-centric, like we have very, very good internet connectivity here in Helsinki, and I think in Finland in general, but there are places that don't have this high-speed internet. And the other thing is when it's using at the same time, the networks aren't really designed to handle that kind of traffic. And so this is kind of like a real case scenario. Someone's trying to check the news and it's like 20 seconds they're waiting before they can click on an article or do something. And I think that's quite bad. And the question is, like, what about my internet here at home? I ran some tests. So actually it says that I have 37 megabits down and upload of 9, which sounds amazing. But again, I'll call it feeling stuff. It doesn't feel so fast. And I thought, what about this speedtest.net? How fast is it? So I ran the speed test on there on Lighthouse, and it's awesome, right? 87, really fast timed interactive. Like, this is really the ideal, what we're looking for. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, why is that? And then I found out they fed a mobile website that doesn't do anything. It says, hey, just get the app. So I thought, well, then what's desktop? And it's 30. And look at this time to interactive, 26 seconds. And probably pretty obvious if you go there why. There's like tons of ads and images everywhere, and it takes forever. And so I feel a little bit cheated, and there's even more ads that show up after you dismiss the cookies, which is a little bit odd. So that's kind of my quick rundown of like what's going on with media in Finland. And I've always heard people here say, hey, people are on fast connections, people are on 4G connections with their phones. And I think we need to rethink that here in Finland and in Europe in general, especially times of crisis, right? So when the network is getting congested or people are not getting the reliability they want, it's even more important than before to really optimize your front end. And this isn't meant to be exhaustive, but just to kind of start the conversation. And these are just kind of my ideas. But some big wins are reducing the size of images, reducing the size of your JavaScript payload. And it's going to be related to number 3 below, which is get the interactive time as fast as possible. And I have a quick note that it's hard. That's something I'm working on recently. And I think, in the favor of minimalism and being lean, like, can we use less stuff maybe, right? Like, can there just be less things and still have a good experience? Or could we load async where possible? And I have some quick ideas how to achieve that. And I think optimizing, replacing, or omitting heavy libraries that you're using, unless they're used extensively, like Bootstrap, Material UI, Font Awesome. For example, I'm working on a project where I have just a couple of icons, but it's quite large payload for Font Awesome, so I don't think it's really benefiting the project in this case. Also consider the implications of better developer experience against the actual end user experience. And so I hear a lot of people shouting lately, hey, developer experience, like, it's the best, we have to do this, and there's lots of tooling. But I think we really need to kind of balance that developer experience against, like, what's the end user experience and what's the expectation? Like maybe there's a happy medium. Like, maybe the developer experience doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Maybe we could reduce it, right, 10 or 20% and improve the performance, right? Maybe that's a good trade-off. And I can't tell you the exact solution there. It depends, right, on the project, but it's something you should think about. And the other thing is, every time you add a library to your project, just be aware of the performance hit you're taking. Like, every time you add a new library, like, there's a performance hit. So be aware of it. And this is something I think that's important. It doesn't have to be Lighthouse, but integrating some sort of testing mechanism into your CI/CD so that when you're creating new branches and testing ideas and creating new features, you're making sure that the performance isn't degrading, or if it is degrading, you're making some intentional decision that, yes, the performance is degrading, but it's worth it because of this feature, because of this win. It shouldn't just be arbitrarily adding more and more data and making the website slower. All right, so I'll paste this into a quick gist after, but I've been working with Lighthouse CLI, so this is like a quick starter that you can use. And here's a quick config that you can start that just focuses on performance, at least initially. And now I want to talk a little bit about why I think your Gatsby site probably ain't so fast. This is not in any way meant to knock Gatsby, because I think it's great technology and I'm using it on projects as well, but it's touted as being super fast. Fast. I read tons of articles. If you search on Gatsby, they're super fast. And this is what Gatsby says about itself. It makes big promises. Fast in every way that matters. Gatsby is a free and open source framework based on React that helps developers build blazing fast websites and apps. Fast. So this is what I read about Gatsby, and it's what I keep hearing. But the reality is that I think it's not so fast, right? And I think that it's not prioritized, this problem with Gatsby of it being in some ways slow. So where Gatsby is super fast, I think out of the box, is with these starter simple blogs. And I think it's super fast when you are not having like a heavy, super like complicated app behind it, right? And I think it's also super fast in terms of the time that it displays the website, right? This first paint that we're going for, and that was super important. And I believe what happened, and I don't know the exact timing, but Lighthouse is now penalizing this, and Google is penalizing this. They're saying, hey, that's like fake fast. And what I see with Gatsby sites is that they load super fast, but you can't do anything with them. It's like fake, right? Like I don't know how to think. Like those old, you know, I can't remember, in Blazing Saddles, they'd walk up to the building and they would kick it and it would fall over, right? It looked like a real building, but then it was fake. And Gatsby, like in terms of performance, they talk about it on their site. And so even if you can find this performance section, which is buried in the references, number one is supporting progressive web apps, caching, using local HTTPS. These are like all really good things to do, but I think they don't have that big of an impact on the front end for, like, I don't think these are the first things you should approach. And then they actually continue, and it's like number 10 is talking about profiling site performance with React Profiler. And I just want to point out that this is like the first thing here. It's actually talking about your code being the reason that things are slow. So the biggest offender is the time to interactive, right? And so this is one of the best performing media websites we saw before. And how do we get that faster? These are some solutions I'm using. So use Lighthouse, make up a hypothesis, test it, right? See, does it actually make it faster? Gatsby plugin Webpack Bundle Analyzer. This project's dead, but I'm using it. It still works, and I think it's quite useful for analyzing your Webpack bundle to try and identify which of those libraries you've included are making your bundle huge. Gatsby plugin prefetch Google Fonts, also dead, but it's quite useful if you're using Google Fonts. This will make them more performant. Chrome DevTools, performance, network waterfall, but I'd say it's obfuscated in this Gatsby kind of world, because we don't really know what those things are. We have to then go back to the Webpack bundle and see what the bundle is and see why it's so large. But I think it's still useful to kind of trace through why we're getting this slow timed interactive. And kind of the message I want to give everyone going forward and kind of introduce this conversation, but like, how do we keep it going? Like, performance isn't just for releases. Like, it's an everyday thing. Like, how can we make sure our projects are going to run fast all the time, right? We don't want it to get consistently slow over time and only think about it when we have this version 2 or version 3. It should always be fast. And this is what we're suffering from right now. This is why these media sites are perhaps slow, because we've never had a problem where the internet's been slow, or at least not for a long time. And today is like the day, I think, to get started. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you. And I'd love to see if we could open the floor a little bit if there's questions in the chat. And if you have questions for me, I can answer. But if you have ideas, please go ahead and say them now.
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree with you, James. Like we often think about performance and also like accessibility and security and all of those other things as almost like edge cases. And the thing is that when a crisis hits, right? Like the internet is slow. Also, like so many people are on medium devices, right? Like time to interactive is a really big problem on medium devices that many people have out. And when you try to access a site, say to, submit a form to get tested or something like that, suddenly, you're putting people in real danger. And I think it really accentuates whether we integrate things into our process or not when a crisis strikes. Yeah, I'm with you. I also don't have like super definitive answers, but I really like that you bring up the topic.
Yeah, thank you. That's wonderful.
So we have one question in chat, or actually maybe a couple. So Olavi is asking, would you say it would make sense to create text-only versions of the websites for times like this?
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if he's on the line, if he wants to punch in and talk about it, but we were actually talking on Slack earlier about this very idea, and maybe he's got some opinions also.
Yeah, I think it might make sense for at least for some news websites and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I read a little bit after what you said. I found an article, and I believe it was during the Hurricane Katrina. Some of the news websites in the United States were creating text-only versions of their website for use during the disaster. And I think this is really not a bad idea, but I think there's certainly people, if they're not aware of it, right? Like, how do you communicate there's a text-only website? Like, then it's kind of this alternative. So I think perhaps building sites in a way, like if they're used by the masses and they have to think about first, is really important. But I think it's a really interesting idea. I'm a bit older, so I remember back in the advent of the web and even Gopher, which was the tool that predated the web, and back then everything was text, and images were added, and then images were optional. And I think it was like around like mid 1990s, right? We had graphical web browsers where they would just automatically download all the images. And I think if we fast forward to today, there's this expectation that everything is so media rich, and it's not just images, but also video and advertisements and animations. And I think for me personally, like I would really appreciate a text-only news outlet, because I'm just interested to keep up on the news. Like I don't need so much images, or it's actually more important for me to have it quicker, or be able to kind of scan quickly. I think it's an interesting idea. Maybe all websites should be text-only, perhaps, and then only progressively we add images or other things. But I think this ideal is too hard to implement now because we've gone really far down this road. But I think a text alternative is a really compelling and interesting idea.
Yeah, Tracy has good points on the chat about like how to use less data, not only for performance but also for those who like pay-per-use on the mobile networks. I think it's something that in Finland we easily don't think about, because I think most of the usage here is you pay a monthly fee and then you have unlimited data.
Also related to this, what Tracy said about offline data and like the country differences and how we pay. So Cedric mentioned that in Belgium you pay for data in mobile and at home, and that we're not as lucky as here in Finland. We have a monthly subscription. I wanted to comment that one of the good learning experiences that I myself as a developer have had during the last 2 years was 2 trips to New Zealand. And 3 years, because the first time I went to New Zealand was in 2017, and the second time was in late 2019. And the lesson that I learned was, of course, like paying for the data usage. We had to think about different plans, like what to get for the mobile SIM that we're using. And even though that was like easy to pick and pick what subscription and how much you're paying for that, what opened my eyes was the fact that in 2017, not many mobile apps or websites were offline first. And New Zealand was a curious case about, like, especially compared to Finland, because even though in Finland we're like geographically we're a flat country, pretty much everywhere we have good like cell phone reception. And in New Zealand, it's understandable that like close to mountains you don't have that many towers, you don't have reception. But it was weird to notice that even on the places where there's a lot of fields and the country is flat, even that sort of couldn't guarantee that you would have reception. And combined to poor reception, the fact that not many mobile apps are like offline first optimized, that was a very eye-opening experience for me as a developer, that, well, I live in a country where we have this privilege that is then like guiding the way our applications and services are developed. I'm aware of like offline first apps and PBAs and these things, but we don't talk about it in the at work or in those cases that we're making. So like I think that this crisis is sort of focusing our attention to these things more, and that's why I really enjoyed listening to you, James, speak, because it's a critical subject during this time. And like, I don't know about other countries, but in Finland still, I think the official emergency way of communicating things to citizens is that you're supposed to have a radio. And through radio, you're like, if everything else fails, we would get emergency like guidelines and stuff through radio. And I personally, I don't own a radio. If I listen to a radio station, it's via online radio. The case of looking at like media websites, because now we get the news through the media websites, and that's how we stay on track. But then if also the internet fails or is like crowded, then it's really hard to get the crucial information that we would want to get out of it. So this is just my 2 cents. Thank you, James, for your speech.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really good point. And I can share at least my experience traveling around to some different countries. I won't mention which, but a lot of times you don't have fast internet. And I think in a lot of countries, you either have only internet on the phone or maybe at home. And so when you're in places like remote villages, the internet may be really slow or accessed in different ways. I don't think that's the case yet, but it seems like there's degradation, at least from what I can anticipate here. So like, how can we give some relief to that? I think the point is like just limiting the streaming services doesn't help. And yeah, I'm a little bit afraid there's going to be like a rush on the radios at like Verkkokauppa after this talk. Don't everyone buy the radio at the same time. I know I have a ham radio, small walkie-talkie, so it's for similar kinds of things. But yeah, it's kind of scary thing to think about, like what if the internet just stopped working completely in Finland, and like how would you get information? Yeah, really good point. Juhas, I think at least on my clock we've got like maybe 5 more minutes.
Yeah, so we can, like for the next 5 minutes, if there's still questions, comments, and then later on, other things come to mind, we can always continue in the Slack. But yeah, William, go ahead.
Right, so from tooling perspective, this sounds really like something that you would like to have in your continuous delivery pipeline, maybe. I would like to know if I'm introducing something that's really degrading the performance of my website. So do you have any recommendations for tooling for testing performance? Maybe automated?
Yeah, so I think the latest thing I'm looking into is Lighthouse, and I think it gives a pretty good barometer. Like if I anchor that to Gatsby just for a moment, then we could talk about other things. But I know on Gatsby Cloud, which is their paid or somewhat freemium building service, they are actually giving the Lighthouse speeds. And so that's kind of a nice barometer check. But what it does is it only checks the homepage, right? So the main route of your app, and it gives you those scores. And so you can kind of see quickly if it's degrading. But I don't know that it alerts you. I don't know that it shows you trends, and it doesn't really explain how or why. But I think if you can expose in your tooling something more specific, like about bundle sizes going up, about the JS. I know there's some monitoring solutions, and maybe Olavi could give some more specifics, or we can put them in the Slack after, but just some sort of way like that you can continuously kind of review things and figure out, like, for me, I think it's not about like over time, but it's like each time you create a new feature branch and you merge that in, are you degrading the performance? Like it should be intentional. I think if you can integrate that in GitHub or whatever your workflow is, like that's going to give you the most power up front. I mean, I've been thinking about performance for a long time. I've always done it manually in the browser and really tried to focus on like fixing the problems that have happened over a long period of time. But I think that's actually quite challenging work. The goal would probably be to avoid that by using one of these solutions. And again, maybe some other people have some better ideas. But Lighthouse, I think, is just one of those answers. And I don't know that Lighthouse in itself is the end-all be-all of performance, like this performance score getting it to 100, because that's just one person's idea of performance, and maybe that doesn't perform well in some other ways, right? It's what's working well for that project. But yeah, great question.